I'm going to need
I don't know if they
use this desk. George, you're late.
I had class pictures.
Really?
Wait, did they call it debate? No, they're doing middle school now. I've heard Carson's here too.
George, there's a quiz you got to take. This is it right here.
Okay.
Okay. We're talking about the tides today. Tony.
What's up? I was taking a picture for the yearbook.
Very nice. You got to take this quiz right here.
All right.
While we're going over stuff.
I got you.
Okay. We want to talk about the tides.
Okay, I get my.
How the tides are created.
Michael.
No.
Zach, you got to take this quiz right here.
Of course.
Okay. You do me a favor, can you sit over here? Because she's got a camera there.
Oh, nice.
Pretty.
Oh.
Thank you. Y'all got to take this quiz right here.
Hazard.
This is the number, and that's the secret number. All right. So, how are the tides made? Well, what the tide is, it's a bulge of water that points toward the towards the moon. And somebody took my Earth globe and my moon globe. I guess I could use this as an Earth globe. Can y'all see the little Earth there?
Yeah.
Isn't that a cool little globe? So, if this were the moon, and y'all got to look up here to actually see this. If this were the moon going around the Earth, and this is not to scale, the moon would be much smaller than this if the Earth were that size. And the moon would be way further away. The moon would be all the way across the room. But the moon does exert gravity on the Earth. And so as the moon's going around like this, it's pulling on the Earth. And the water of the Earth will bulge toward the moon. Yeah.
Oh, it says I don't have access to the quiz.
Are you sure you put in these numbers? That number? And that word?
Well, I haven't gotten to do that yet.
You have to put in that number to get to the quiz.
Oh, not 600.
That's right.
Oh, okay, gotcha.
So, as the moon goes around the Earth, it pulls the water of the Earth toward it. And so there will be a bulge of water pointed toward the moon. So let's say the moon is right here, there's a big bulge of water, and the Earth is spinning around it. And the bulge of water stays pointed toward the moon. So there will be a bulge of water here. Let me do it with this other globe. Might be a little easier to see.
Do you need someone to hold the globe for you?
How this works. Let's pretend this is the Earth and this is the moon. There's a bulge of water pointed toward the moon. Now the Earth is spinning, and the bulge of water stays pointed toward the moon. So as the Earth spins, the point where you are on the Earth goes under the bulge of water, and when it's under the bulge of water, that's high tide. And then when it's perpendicular, that's low tide. So there's a bulge of water, it shows it on this. There's a bulge of water pointed toward the moon. Here's the moon, here's the bulge. And so the water is bulging up toward the moon, and if you're let's say you're in Africa, on the coast of Africa right here. As the Earth turns and Africa moves to where the bulge is, that'll be high tide for you. And if Africa moves along past the bulge, you're back to low tide. So the water will always be pulled up toward the moon. And so as the Earth turns, where you are, let's say you're at this point right here. Well, let's say right here so everybody can see it. That yellow spot right there, that's where you are. Low tide there. Now you're pointing toward the moon, that's high tide. That make sense? Now it's pointed towards my stomach, it's low tide again because the moon is over here. One thing you need to understand, it's also high tide on the other side of the earth as the moon. And this is something that doesn't make sense to a lot of folks. So if the moon's over here, you get a bulge of water on this side, but you also get a bulge of water on that side. And I got to show you the reason why. And to show you this, I got to move this out of the way. And I have to have a volunteer. A female volunteer. Mary, why don't you come help me?
Do you want me to?
Pass that to George.
Okay.
You have good long hair where we can do this. Come up here. What we're going to do, come here. We're going to hold hands. And we're going to, you got to hold tightly. We're going to hold tightly. And I'm going to swing you around. Okay? And now wait, push your hair back behind you. So I want you to watch her hair as I swing her around, okay? Watch the back of her hair, okay? We're going to swing her around fast. See how it goes back? See how the hair goes back? Okay, we're done. Give a big round of applause. You're a good dancer, Mary Banks.
Thank you.
So, did you see her hair flowing back as I was pulling from this side? That's exactly what the Earth's water does. As the moon is pulling, the Earth is kind of pulled away from its water. So you get a big bulge of water on this side. So there's a bulge of water on both sides of the Earth. There's one pointed toward the moon. There's one pointed away from the moon. That's what causes the tides. The Earth spins through this. And so, again, if this were the Earth, if you were right here on the Earth, it'd be low tide, then high tide, then low tide, then high tide again as you're facing the other way. There are 2 high tides a day. Y'all see?
Yes.
That's why there are 2 high tides a day. You ever wonder why there are 2 high tides a day? Probably not. Now you know. Now, the other thing you have to understand, did y'all know that high tide gets about 50 minutes later each day? So today, if high tide was at 3 o'clock, do we know what time? Look, it's almost high tide right there. So high tide is going to be, see the red thing on the clock? That points up when it's high tide. So it's going to be high tide about noon today. You know what time it's going to be high tide tomorrow? About 12:50. So why is there this 50-minute difference? It's because the moon is moving. The moon is right here today. It's going to be right here tomorrow. And here the next day. And here the next day. And here the next day. The moon moves around. Did y'all know the moon moves around the Earth?
Indeed.
Okay, so let's say you're at this point on the Earth again. Let's say it's right where this little yellow thing is right there. Let's say that's where you are on the Earth. And you're facing the moon here, and it's high tide at noon. The next day, the moon will have moved to here. You'll go around once. Student council. If you're on student council, they want your picture.
Not good enough.
No one here is good enough?
Nope.
Go to student council meetings, does that count?
No.
Do you want to?
All right, so here you are. Here's this point again. This point again is where you are. Here you are at noon today. The moon will move. So you spin back around. That's noon tomorrow, but the moon has moved some, so you got to spin a little more to get to where the moon is the next day. And it's about 50 minutes more each day. Does that make sense? So as the moon moves around, high tide gets later and later.
Well,
Yes?
your class is the one with the ending is 311, right? Our usernames.
Yeah.
I got 2 classes. That's why. Use Q.
I think so.
They end with 311, right?
Yeah. All right. Now there's something else called spring tide and neap tide. These are monthly tidal patterns that you have to understand. So once again, here's the Earth. Pretend this is the Earth. Well, wait, I tell you what. Let's do this. Let's pretend this is the sun. Can you hold the sun for me, Zach? Zach's got the sun. Here, this will be the Earth. Okay, I need this again. Can you let go? Here's the Earth. Here's the moon. That's the sun. The sun also has a pull on the Earth's water. It's not as much as the pull the moon has because the moon's so much closer than the sun. But it's still a pull. If the moon were to disappear, there'd still be tides from the sun. They just wouldn't be nearly as high. They'd be like a 1/5 as high, something like that. So you get here, we have about 10-foot difference between the tides. But the sun can change it a foot or so either direction. Maybe even a couple feet either direction. So why is that? Well, the sun has a pull, and again, the Earth is spinning, and as the Earth spins through past the sun, you go through a little bit of high tide from the sun. So if you add those tides together, the moon and the sun combined, when the moon and the sun are all in line, you get an especially high tide. Or when the moon is on the other side of the Earth and the sun's on that side, you also get a big high tide. A lot of interruptions. There's a lot of stuff I told y'all that I can do that y'all can't. Remember I said that? No. This is one of them. This is one of them. This is one of them. There we go. Okay. All right, enough of that. So here we go. So here is the moon. If the moon and the sun and the Earth are all in a line together, that is what we call spring tide. That means you add their forces, the force of their pulls together, and you get these real big tides. That's called spring tide, and you can see how big it is right there. And then there's another one called neap tide. If the moon and the Earth and the sun are at right angles to one another. So it's this situation here. Sun there, Earth here, and then moon over here. Their forces are not combining. They're exactly perpendicular to one another, and it kind of evens the tides out throughout the Earth. And those high tides aren't going to be as high as spring high tides. And you'll probably notice whenever it's a full moon, so if they're all in line, if the moon's on this side, that's what we call a full moon. You can see the whole moon from the Earth. It's all lit up from the sun. And so if you have a full moon, that's when the tides are the biggest. That's the spring tide. Or if you have a new moon, when the moon's on the other side, and you can't see it because the back side is lit, you can't see the moon, it's out in the middle of the day, you still have the biggest tides. So the biggest tides are spring tides, and it comes twice a month during new moon and full moon. And then the other parts of the month, it's called neap tide, and the high tide isn't nearly as high, and the low tide isn't as low. This shows it real well. Check this out. Very cool computer simulation. So, this is the Earth spinning around. This is the moon, and you can see how the moon is lit. Only half the side of the moon is lit that's facing the sun. The sun is way over to the right in this diagram. The sun's way over there that way, far off. And so here we go. There's apparently a person or something on the Earth just spinning really fast. But it shows that the Earth will go around 30 times, will spin around 30 times for each time the moon goes around once. That's what we call a month. So here we see, they're all in line, and look at that bulge, look at that water bulge. Now they've exaggerated the water bulge so you can see it. It's not really as big as they're showing it. But here we go, there's a spring tide, look how big the bulge is. And then there's a neap tide, it's kind of even throughout. And there's a spring tide again, look at the bulge on both sides, it's big. And now we are at a neap tide again, not as big of a bulge. Does that make sense? Ask a question. You understand the tides?
Yes.
The tide is high.
Now, does this also affect like lake tides also, or is it only ocean?
Great question. A big lake like the Great Lakes would have a little bit of tide, but not much. Yeah. I think I asked Mr. Gardner about that once. He goes up there every year. I think he said there was a little bit of a tide. A little lake wouldn't have any. It has to be a large amount of water. Video footage. Woo. What is this? No, not it.
Gravity is a great.
Okay, here we go.
The way its presence can conjure up this torrent of water and these waves. And how does it do this? With the help of gravity. Gravity is a great universal attraction. It keeps us firmly in our place on Earth and keeps the moon in orbit around us. But while the Earth is attracting the moon is also attracting the Earth, pulling at our oceans. So I have a set of scales, a metal block, and a powerful little magnet. You see, the force of gravity is very similar to magnetism. They're both forces of attraction. If I put the metal block on the scales, you can see it weighs 1.3 kilograms. When I put the magnet in and nudge it closer, the block appears to weigh less. You can see the needle moving. That's because the magnet is attracting the metal towards it, pulling it upwards off the scales. And that's what the moon is doing. It's pulling on the oceans, moving them upwards, away from the surface of the Earth. The gravitational force of the moon causes the oceans to bulge slightly. And as the Earth spins, this bulging produces high and low tides.
Understand, it doesn't really bulge that much. They're exaggerating it.
The size of the tides depends on the distance between the Earth and the moon.
Cool. That showed it pretty well. Tidal bulge.
Isn't that you, Mr. Willis?
Nah, just let the kids think. Alright.
That is you, Mr. Willis.
This shows a tidal chart. You can go to this NOAA site and pull up a tidal chart. Here's what it looks like. Tidesandcurrents.noaa.gov. And you can click on your state. And and they have several places reporting here. They don't have us. Dag nabbit.
I'm serious.
Dang planet.
Dang planet.
How about down here, Fernandina Beach?
Yeah. Hey.
Here it shows the tides. You can see how the tides go up and down each day. A lot of information on here. Tide charts can be predicted exactly because we know what the position of the moon and the sun are going to be at thousands of years into the future. So you can predict that when the high and low tides are going to be. It's kind of it's just a little, a couple days, isn't it just a couple days past the full moon?
Yes, sir.
So we have pretty high tides right now. You'll see when during the full moon, during the spring tides, it almost like gets up to the edge of the causeway. It's pretty
I remember
high.
driving through it.
And if there's a storm, pushes a storm tide up, it can cover the causeway. That's why you'll almost not be able to get off the island if there's a hurricane. Service Council? Very nice. This is a map showing the Earth here, and everywhere where you see a green line like we have there, that type of tide is called SemiDiurnal. Can you say SemiDiurnal?
SemiDiurnal.
SemiDiurnal is when you have 2 high tides and 2 low tides a day. That's what we have. But it's true that not everywhere is like that. Some places, because of the curvature, see, if the Earth were just a water planet, everywhere would have 2 high tides and 2 low tides a day, if there were no continents on it. But with the continents stop and change the flow of water and don't allow water to get in and out of some places very quickly. And this can cause water to come in more slowly and drain more slowly. And some places, like look at the Gulf right there. The Gulf has what we call diurnal tides. Diurnal means 1 high tide and 1 low tide a day, instead of 2 and 2. So they have a different, and so the green areas have 2 high and low a day. The yellow areas just have 1 high and low a day, and the red have kind of a mixture. You might get 2 one day, you might get 1.5 one day. It might vary depending on the time of the month. So there's a lot of curveballs thrown in there and the tides based on the shape of the coasts of the continents and such. So it's not as easy as these models make it out to be. So we call it semi-diurnal when it's 2 highs and 2 lows a day. That's normal. The place with the greatest tidal change is this place. I want to say it's called the Bay of Fundy. Does anyone have their book open?
I think that's what it is.
Does it say it's in Maine?
It's in Maine.
Does it say how high the difference is between high and low tides?
It's 20 feet.
20 feet? And this is because of, remember how I said how we had this curve here, so when water comes in and it hits different areas of the coast, it's all funneled into where we are? Some places are even more like that. Some places have bays where the water is all funneled to one location. It's even worse than we have. I thought there was a place in Alaska that had even greater than the Bay of Fundy. But you can see, look at that. That would be hard to take that boat out right there. Right there at low tide. You might have to wait. Pretty cool.
Not much use.
What's that?
I was gonna say not much use for that dock.
No. He shouldn't have. He didn't realize he's
But I know we were
parking
gonna
on that side of the dock.
It's in Alma, New Brunswick.
Alma, New Brunswick?
Yes, sir.
So it's not in Maine?
Oh, it's It's the main Gulf
Oh,
that's between Nova Scotia and New Brunswick.
okay.
They even have that same exact picture in Wikipedia.
Oh, yeah, a lot of these pictures are taken from NHS. There we go. Somebody grab the camera.
Hey, that only
We're actually,
that only if you're like inducted now or you go.
Yeah.
Hey, yeah, what?
You're inducted now.
inducted now.
Inducted now.
Yeah.
How do you get inducted?
I will get inducted.
Yeah, but how?
Because she missed, what's her name? I had to send her all this stuff and you get a letter.
Okay, so this is, the last thing in this chapter is called a tidal bore. A tidal bore is when the tide comes in so fast that it actually creates a wave. And we call the wave a tidal bore. And you can see it right there. And it's only in some locations on the earth. It doesn't happen everywhere. We don't have it here. The tide comes in gradually. But in some places, the tide comes in real fast. It has to do with the geography of the location. Here's video footage of people surfing the tidal bore. This is pretty cool. Sometimes the tide will come up, and then it'll come over some kind of dam or something like that and produce this wave that moves really fast.
It's like a mini tsunami.
Yeah, it's not nearly like a tsunami, but it is a wave that's produced by the tide coming in. It happens every time the tide comes in.
You're cool. Okay.
I'm cool?
There. You're already cool.
I'm very confused, right?
That wave you see, that's it right there. There's people like surfing it.
Yeah.
Like all the way. I don't know how long. I guess you've been surfing for a while. Not that big, but it's got enough power to push people along.
The tide comes in really fast.
Everybody's gathered around to see it, I guess.
That's the tide. Only in some places.
Somebody's got to play with it on a jet ski.
How are they surfing much?
What is it?
Ambassadors Club.
What is that?
It's ambassadors.
You're cool. Yeah.
How would you know? I know that you're not in it.
Yeah.
I'm in it. So I know.
You're paddleboarding.
They're paddleboarding. How cool is
The
that?
most dangerous paddleboard? You got to watch that. Not again. It was so slow.
It's not just about people setting records. It's also about records caused by forces of nature. Every year, tornadoes, hurricanes, and floods terrorize communities all across America. But one of the most frightening natural disasters is actually one of the least known. It's called a tidal bore, a massive wall of water that rises up out of the ocean, devouring everything in its path. The Guinness record for the longest and largest tidal bore struck eastern China, 30 feet tall and 200 miles long. It left in its wake a devastating trail of panic and death. This mammoth wave was triggered when the Earth, Moon, and Sun aligned, causing a gravitational pull so intense that it forced the water in the China Sea to literally rise up and surge into the Chinese coast. Amazingly, tidal bores strike with such deadly regularity in this area that a festival was organized to celebrate its annual arrival. In the fall of 1993, a record 11,000 people showed up and waited for the first sign of the wave. At first, the tidal bore appeared as an innocent ripple on the horizon. But as it raced towards the coast, the jubilant festival goers were unaware of the fury that was bearing down on them. The waves swelled in size and gathered speed, pushing a record 2 million gallons of water a second toward shore. As the towering tidal bore broke across the levee, panic set in. The swirling currents sucked the shocked onlookers into the riptide. Frantic rescue efforts began, but all they had were bamboo branches. They were not prepared to handle the disaster. Helpless festival goers watched in horror as dozens were swept to a watery grave. Reportedly, over 100 people died. Everyone will be forever haunted by the memory of the world's largest tidal bore and the human tragedy that left in its wake.
That's scary.
It was pretty intense.
Alright, so you read about the tides, and that does it